Good morning, Tree of Liberty subscribers. Today is Monday, November the 16th. I'm Dr. Shannon Bear Gibson, coming to you from the Tree of Liberty Southern Command. And we have a special message for you today. After we started releasing these videos, I keep getting people that contact me that say things like, give us a word of encouragement or tell us something that we can have hope. And then they immediately say, because the media says this, the media says that. Folks, I could care less what the media says. Many of you, if you've watched these videos closely, you realize that I'm always going to look for a parallel in the Bible to what I'm seeing happening in the world, and because it's always there. And folks, do you know who the media are? Who their best parallel is in the Bible? It is the prophets of Baal. And you may say, what do you mean by the prophets of Baal? Weren't they false prophets for a false god? Yes, they were. But I want to quickly go to 1 Kings chapter 18 with you. If you want to look in your Bible, it's verses 26 through 30. You get an apt description of the prophets of Baal. I'm going to quickly tell you the story, and then we'll get to the message that I want you to take away from today's video. But basically, Elijah, the prophet, came on the scene because the king and queen, Ahab and Jezebel, had introduced Baal worship into Israel, or had greatly expanded it, I guess you should say. And they had these 450 prophets of Baal that would go around that would spread disinformation. They probably had some basic magic trick kind of things they did to fool people, to make people think they had some power and to lead them astray from the one true God. Well, Elijah comes on the scene and he's disgusted with it, and he actually prays to God, and God shuts the heavens and sends this massive famine on the land of Israel. So much so that Ahab and Jezebel have people looking for the prophet Elijah. Well, after a few years, Elijah challenges the prophets of Baal and manages to get the entire populace of the nation of Israel up on Mount Carmel to see this showdown. And so he basically tells the prophets of Baal, you go first. And what the challenge was that the people who were going to stand there and watch and see who had the real power, the prophets of Baal or Almighty God. And so he tells the prophets of Baal, cut yourself up an offering, and the God that answers by fire, that God will be God of Israel. And so the prophets of Baal start off, and this goes on all day, folks, if you read in the 1 Kings chapter 18. So the prophets of Baal, they go and they cut up their offering, they put it on the stones, and they start, in the morning, start dancing around prophesying or preaching that Baal is going to answer by fire. And they're all sweaty and dancing and doing all their motions. And basically about lunchtime, Elijah starts mocking them. He says, maybe your God's asleep. Maybe he's on the toilet. He says some horrible things to prophets of Baal in front of the people. And the prophets of Baal cannot stand to be mocked because they know they're liars. And so they become very frantic. The Bible actually used the word frantic at this point. It says they prophesied louder. They started talking louder when Elijah starts speaking truth to them. They're trying to drown him out. And they even start slashing themselves and bleeding all over their altar and things to try to get Baal's attention. But Baal's a false god. He doesn't exist. And so after all day of this, after it gets to the end, the key verse there, it says, no one answered and no one paid attention. That's what the media's problem is right now, folks. You see the truth, so you're no longer answering them. You're not paying attention to them anymore. So don't worry about what they have to say. And the story has a very happy ending for the people of God. Elijah actually pours 12 pitchers of water on his altar to make sure it won't light like it's supposed to. And then he just simply stands back and prays to God, and God sends fire from heaven down. And it is proven that God is the one true God. You may say, well, what does this have to do with the American election, the American people? Do you know why the media is frantic right now, folks? It's because you're awake. It's because you're standing there just like the people of Israel were standing there watching this happen between Elijah and the prophets of Baal. You're watching this happen between the Trump campaign and the Biden campaign. I will tell you that most of the time in an election, it may not be as much of a choice of good versus evil. Sometimes there's two Christian candidates. Sometimes there's two candidates that are not Christians. But in this election, with the issues that came forward and the things that were said, we had a choice between good and evil. Not between a perfect man and an imperfect man. We had a choice between a man who said he would allow religious liberty and a man who said he would not. And I don't know if you can get any more stern than that. And then you had the pro-life, pro-choice. You had a lot of things that broke down in this election. And so a lot of you as Christians woke up and realized, hey, this is not Democrat versus Republican. This is good versus evil. So anyway, The things that has gotten the media so frantic and tore up is because they can count, they have eyes, and they realize you do too. So just take a few examples. The Trump rally in Washington this weekend. Most of the media didn't cover it at all, but if they did, they gave you close-in shots and tried to imply the crowd was small. I think the biggest estimate I heard on the mainstream media was about 100,000. I have no idea. I wasn't there. But I did see the shots from the tops of the buildings, and there was a tremendous crowd down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington. I was there for the prayer gathering a couple of months ago, and the media said we had about 10,000 people, and the Park Service actually came back and corrected them and said, no, it was 10 times that. It was about 100,000. So, I mean, you can tell they're going to lie about numbers. They know you can see. But let me just ask you this basic logic question here, folks. And I try to stay with things of the spirit, but sometimes it's reflected in the physical world so well. If Facebook and Twitter really thought you weren't a big crowd, why haven't they canceled all of you when you've put up all these pro-Trump posts and all these posts questioning former Vice President Biden? The reason they haven't is because, just like I said, they can count. They're not about to give up 73 million followers and subscribers and ways to make profit. They can put all the tags on their election tags when they want. But the fact is they're going to throw a few of the leaders off, but they cannot afford to throw a crowd that is probably the biggest crowd that's ever assembled to vote for a candidate in American history, and they know it. And that is making them panic. So they're used to Republicans being like Jeff Flake and Mitt Romney. They're used to people who bow down, and when the media tries to feed them a load of garbage, they just accept it and tell everybody else to accept it. But the days of Mitt Romney and Jeff Flake are over. And now we're Republicans that fight back. We're Republicans that notice the lies. I'm going to point to you a couple of lies if you don't believe me. You have a memory. You know. What did the media say about the state of Iowa the day before the election? Think back. It was Biden +4. Trump couldn't win without Iowa, right? Do you know what the real vote was in Iowa? Trump won by between 7 and 8%. The media was wrong by 12% on the day before the election. What about Wisconsin? The media said Biden +17, +18, depending on the poll you looked at, the day before the election. It was too close to call on election night. And without a 4:30 in the morning vote dump, which is highly questionable, one of the reasons we're making these videos, Biden doesn't win Wisconsin. Trump does. And so what about Antrim County, Michigan? Very first video I made on the Tree of Liberty site. They said Biden won it 60-40 over Trump. And what did the real number end up being? Some election official from the Republican side of the aisle who wasn't authorized went back and counted the votes. It turns out it was 60-40 for Trump. That's a 40-point vote swing. I know you're thinking I can't count, that it's really 20, but it's -20 for Biden and +20 for Trump. That's a 40-point swing. If you have to go take 40 points in a heavily Republican county for your candidate to win, folks, you are cheating. And folks, you have recognized it. And that's why our modern day prophets of Baal are frantically yelling and screaming around the earth. That's why on every news site, they're leading with Joe Biden won, because they know you don't believe it. And they're frantically yelling because nobody's paying attention to them anymore. You're awake. Stay awake. The easiest thing to look at this, and quite possibly the funniest part of this election, is that Democrats, you can see it just rolls around in their mouth. They hate it. Because to get Joe Biden to 78 million votes, which we all know he doesn't have, to get him to 78 million, they have to say that he beat their messiah, Barack Obama, by 8 million votes. A man who couldn't fill up 30 circles at a rally and not once even got a full high school gymnasium, to beat President Trump's 50,000 person rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, and 30,000 person rally in Rome, Georgia, and many, many others. They have to say that he beat Barack Obama's 2008 campaign. Folks, let me take you back to 2008. Barack Obama, whether you liked him or not, his campaign was on point. It was on message. He didn't say a thing he believed in or not, but he said he believed in hope and change. They had this articulate, nice-looking, well-spoken candidate saying hope, change, to these huge rallies, running against a bitter, angry old man. And they beat the dog out of the Republican Party in 2008. And they know it. Just like we know that Trump beat their guy this year. And so to get their guy across the line, these false prophets of Baal have to get up there and they have to slash themselves and they have to say that Joe Biden got 8 million more votes than Barack Obama. Folks, he didn't get within 8 million votes of Barack Obama. I can tell you that. You know it, and you know it's true. Folks, what we need is a hand recount in every state. I'm not worried that South Carolina or Idaho or Texas will go for Biden. I'm not worried that Rhode Island and Massachusetts and New Jersey will go for Trump. But if we got paper ballots, we need a recount there, because I guarantee you that Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, probably Minnesota, definitely Arizona and Nevada have not been counted correctly. Folks, we've seen in Antrim County, Michigan, they're not counting these votes correctly. Get the paper ballots out, put them out on the tables, get them in a big central location in every state where everybody can see, where you got monitors walking around, and get people out there counting and putting them in piles. If they believed that Joe Biden actually had 78 million votes, the Democrats would be the first ones to agree to this suggestion. But they know it's not true, and that's why they don't want to do it. Keep in mind, this was the party that said recount in Miami-Dade and Broward in 2000. They wanted to keep recounting. They do not want a single recount in this election. Ask yourself why. Because they know it's true, and you know what the truth is. Folks, God bless you, and God bless America.